Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Here we go. That's illegal, you know. It's time for another tale from the big box home improvement store customer service desk. Yesterday, some yuppie chump comes up to my desk and shoves a piece of paper in my face. He says he talked to one of our pro services associates about holding a product for him. Our pro desk is over on the other side of the store, and the guy complains that he doesn't feel like walking over there to get it. Then he tells me that he spoke to the associate on Monday. I explained to him that unless a product is paid for, we won't hold it overnight. Oh, pro associate said he'd hold it for me. How about you go ahead and call over there and ask him? I immediately decide that I'm not going to call because this guy is being that customer. I walk over there and the pro associate's gone home for the day. Fortunately, the product the guy wants is on an aisle right next to the pro desk, so I bring it back and ring him up for it. He decides to pay with a check. When running a check, one of two things can happen. Either it processes electronically, I print void on the check and give it back to the customer, or it has to be run manually, in which case I endorse it and keep it in the till for deposit. This one's the latter, which prompted to keep the check for deposit. I have to have the customer write their phone number on the check for contact purposes. I tell that to the customer. That's illegal, you know. It's been on the books for about 15 years. You should talk to corporate about that. He then blathers on about privacy and doesn't actually cite any laws because there aren't any that make it illegal to request the phone number. He refused to write his phone number down, so I'm SOL, so I just take the check and put it in the till. Oh, and this was all for a transaction of less than $15. And our second story. Captain Karen and the battle at Broken Gate. So this one happened while I was stationed in Yongsan, South Korea as an Army MP. It was winter, so the temps were well below freezing. Think roughly in the low to mid-20s, possibly lower. My partner and I were at the end of our swing shift when we received the call to head to a main gate in our area. Apparently someone had gotten themselves trapped in one and we needed to override the terminal. Some background. The main gates were unmanned booths used to enter the post. It was a process to enter one, but super simple. You had to scan your ID to enter the gate, then inside the gate you had to scan your fingerprints before you could enter the post. These machines oftentimes suffered from user error. Either the user didn't have their card spaced just right for the scanner, or they pressed too hard on the fingerprint console. Also of note, as an MP, we could manually check ID cards at the officer's discretion, but this was not recommended at this time for a number of reasons. One being a counterfeit military ID card in the area being busted recently. While en route, our desk sergeant told us a technician would be on his way, again stating how unusual this call was. When we arrived, we found a civilian lady inside the booth with a small line of various individuals forming near the entrance. We explained to the person trapped, as well as the small crowd forming, that we had a technician coming out to inspect the terminal. After a handful of minutes, the technician arrived and inspected the terminal and found nothing wrong. He instructed the lady to exit the gate through the entrance door, but she still tried to force herself through the exit, the one leading into the post. The technician repeated his order to no avail, but I stepped in and asked her to go back through the other door so the technician could work, using my command voice. After she exited the booth, the technician explained to me and my partner that he was going to perform a system reboot which would take 15 minutes. About 3 minutes after I explained to the crowd the issue, I hear the shrill roar of a wild Karen bellow out, "What's taking so long?" I again respectfully respond with, "The technician is working on it. The timer is at 12 minutes. I then hear the reply, "Is that a effing specialist talking to me like that?" I proceeded to walk to the source of the shrieking and was met by a very irate Marine captain. She starts screaming at me to unlock the neighboring fence to let her in. I couldn't do this for a number of reasons. There was a crowd of civilians forming a line at the booth. While we could manually check the military ID cards, I had a bad feeling about checking the civilian IDs due to the aforementioned counterfeit ring being previously busted. My partner and I, who was a native Korean, did our best to redirect the crowd to the other gates, but Captain Karen kept shouting over us, telling the crowd we were just lazy. We didn't have the keys or even the authorization to unlock that particular gate. I repeatedly explained this to Captain Karen, but she continually shouted that she gave us permission to unlock it, but only for her. Due to the various circumstances surrounding the gate issue, I proceeded to call our desk sergeant, first over the radio, which allowed him to hear the shrieking of the bloated harpy, and then over my personal phone. Not normally allowed, but I needed to speak uninterrupted. While speaking with my desk sergeant, awesome dude by the way, he further iterated that I technically could manually check the IDs, but there was no way for the scans to be in the system. When I went to speak with Captain Karen about the issues once more, she became further irate about how we were incompetent and she'd personally make sure myself and my partner would lose rank, as well as other various humiliations. I finally put her on with Desk Sergeant. He explained to her calmly about the issues, but she shrieked at him that he was just as incompetent as us. He finally got fed up with her and hung up. The rest of the time we were stuck at the gate, a few people got the right idea and went to the other gates, except for the lady who trapped herself, Captain Karen of course, and a handful of other civilians. When the technician finally got the booth back online, Captain Karen proceeded to go into overdrive with how she was going to make sure myself, my partner, and our desk sergeant were going to be stuck doing crap assignments. The trap lady started speaking up at this point, telling us how she was also going to put in a complaint and how she was trapped and how myself and my partner had been nothing but rude to her due to her predicament. Before I could mention anything to her, the technician spoke up and stated, "Ma'am, there was nothing wrong with this gate. All you had to do was step back outside and rescan your ID, but your dumb butt couldn't figure that out." Then the tech told us he'd be emailing a report to the provost marshal's office to help cover us and left. We proceeded to clear the scene and head back to our office, but were immediately called back to the gate by the provost marshal himself. He heard the first call over the radios. He actually had his own radio set up at home so he could monitor us and could audibly hear Captain Karen shrieking. When we returned to the gate, the provost marshal wanted to hear our side of the story. He'd already spoken to the technician as well as a rundown from our desk sergeant. He had an idea of what happened, but wanted a rundown from us. We explained everything, and he got a bit of a chuckle when we told him that Captain Karen would be at his office in the morning. He said not to worry and he'd deal with her. We then got off a little later than we would have liked, but hey, we needed to cover our butts with a report. The next morning, I was collecting my vehicle for the daily assignments when I could hear the sounds of two Caranosaurus Rexes clashing. Captain Karen had shown up to trash us, but she ended up meeting our daytime desk sergeant, Staff Sergeant Karen. This particular staff sergeant was pretty well known to be a tough customer, but luckily for me, I was on her good side. I could hear the two roaring in the back, and I feared the building might explode. My partner and I, same one from the night before, exchanged looks and rushed out to conduct our daily assignment. When we returned after our swing shift, our desk sergeant, the one from the previous night, met us personally while giggling. Apparently, Captain Karen caused such an uproar that Provost Marshal stepped in like he said he would. She attempted to slander us, but Provost Marshal put a stop to that quickly. He listed off a number of illegal orders she had stated, as well as a lack of professionalism on her part. She tried to protest, but Provost Marshal had already had an ace up his sleeve. You see, Captain Karen wasn't permanently assigned to the Yongsan. Her unit was there for some type of training. Not sure what kind of training, though. He was ready to send up paperwork that could have potentially banned her from Yongsan the rest of the time she was scheduled to be there, but decided to give her a choice. He gave her the option to leave quietly and not overstep her bounds again, or he'd be seeking some legal action. She accepted option A. For the last handful of months I was at Yongsan, we never had any more trouble with Captain Karen. Occasionally we'd bump into Marines here and there, and they'd always laugh about how their commander was nearly booted out of Korea. Stories like this always get blown out of proportion. Don't sue. We'll let you come onto our property to fix your sewer line. The house I grew up in was built on the side of a hill. Great views, but the geography posed some challenges for the city utilities, sewage in particular. Their solution was to put all the houses on the hill into what's called a shared line. Essentially, one big pipe ran through all of our backyards, just below the house's basements. Effluent would flow out from the houses into the shared pipe and then down the hill to the city sewer line by the bottommost house. When we moved in, we were at the highest point that was possible to build on and still be a part of that shared sewer line. But a few years later, somebody bought a lot just over the crest of the hill and linked up with ours without being part of the planned community that had an HOA that took care of the sewer line, among other things. And in fact, they did so without the homeowner association approval. So for the next 2 decades, my family would be the subject of near constant harassment over the state of the sewer. Their end of the line was lower than ours by just enough that it would stop flowing and clog, often backing up into their basement, bathroom, and shower. They'd accuse us of diverting our effluent to their line, because I guess we were some kind of plumbing wizards. Now, the reason nobody built a house on that part of the hill during the original development was that the soil was unstable. Something hydrology related. Sure enough, over the years, that house would occasionally separate from the hill and slide down a couple of inches. But our neighbors had connections in the code enforcement agency, so the place never got condemned like it should be. They just had to shore it up and reconnect all the utilities. The thing is, the further down the house moved, the steeper the negative incline was from their sewer connection to our junction box, making the clogs and backups even worse. At one point, it got so bad that their sewer barely flowed. Some days it got completely clogged. Somehow this was our fault. They spent the next year calling us every time they tried to flush a toilet and crap came out in their downstairs shower. They called a plumber who said they had to redo their part of the shared line, and to do it, they'd have to bust through our 2-story masonry wall so they could get a backhoe onto our property and dig out the line. Of course, we had issues with this. We said, no, you will not come into our property and tear it up with a big old piece of construction equipment. Hire human laborers or something. But instead, they hired lawyers who started slinging paper around. According to them, we were in violation of state law that specifically gave an implied easement granting a homeowner access through another's property to maintain their own. So we hired lawyers of our own who said that we basically had a choice. We could win the case but pay a ton of money, or just let it happen. Either way, we'd be screwed. But they did point out one important fact, that 20-year-old masonry wall wasn't in the greatest of shape anyway, so a few months later, we presented them with a bill for $75,000 for the rebuilding of the wall, installation of a new set of stairs, replacement of the entire wrought iron fence that had separated the two properties, resodding, replacement of ornamental plants and shrubs, and some minor repairs to our sewer, which they had borked up while relaying their pipes. I'm not a general contractor, but my guess is they could have hired pick and shovel labor to dig out that pipe and replace it with a new one for a fraction of that price. But no, they had to have a giant Caterpillar tread machine do it. They balked, but then we handed them a Xerox copy of the letter that their lawyers had sent us with, pursuant to paragraph blah 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 of the Common Code blah blah blah, citing the next paragraph, which stated that the person using the easement was 100% responsible for any damage that might be caused. They still balked, but my parents put a lien on their property that stayed there to the day they tried to sell, at which point they had to pay up or the purchaser's creditors wouldn't underwrite a mortgage. I think they had to pay interest too, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.